If you're someone who's thinking about launching a podcast, or if you're struggling to grow the one you've got, you're going to love listening in on this conversation with fellow podcast host Flora McCormick. We are unpacking how her transition away from social media marketing to a strategically positioned podcast helped her to launch a show that's currently growing 5 times faster than the average podcast and attracting new clients to her business every month from around the world. So whether you're new to podcasting or you're an established business owner who wants to use your podcast to grow your business, lean in close for this one so that you can learn how to measure your podcast success, see where you stack up against the competition, and build your authority in an increasingly crowded podcast landscape. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. Flora, welcome. I am so thrilled that you are here today. I can't wait to go back in time with you and really unpack what your podcast has made possible in your business since around a year and a half ago when you launched it. So thanks for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's start there. Let's go back in time. Tell me what led you to want to start a podcast in the first place?
So I had been doing social media. I started into the transition of my normal therapy practice, moving towards parent coaching and having an online group. I started with a lot of social media. That was what I was told was the best way to connect with folks on Facebook, offering free workshops. And I had been doing that about a year and a half. And honestly, it was both exhausting and really bad for my mental health. I mean, here I am in the mental health field, and I just started really noticing this negative relationship with the way that I was trying to attract clients. And I mean, you have to do that as a small business owner. You have to connect. And it was giving me a way to connect with my audience and find new possible clients, but it was draining me in this icky cycle of how many people liked my post, how many people commented, like spam people commenting on the posts and being frustrated and annoyed and having to spend energy to block the spam people and, thinking that XYZ was going to finally get more views on Instagram. And I put a ton of effort into editing a video and finding the right sound that's trending or all these things I was trying to learn about. And then oh my gosh, this is becoming a part-time job on top of my job just to try to understand social media trends. And it was exhausting and it was icky. Like I said, it got me in this relationship with my things I was putting out there of seeing my value based on how many people were commenting or the stats. And it just did not match for me. And also I found it wasn't matching my best skills. I mean, my skill set is more around being able to talk naturally and give an idea cohesively. That's what I do in my parent coaching. And so I thought, okay, I think a podcast would be a perfect way to both get out of this icky cycle with social media and be able to still put out a message and connect with people who could become clients. And also though, do so in a way that fit my skill set better.
Yeah. Oh gosh, we could beat the social media dead horse all day. Everything you're saying, I'm nodding my head, yes, yes, yes. We all experience it. And I feel like as small business owners, that's where we start because we don't maybe necessarily have a big budget to run ads. What other ways are we going to be able to reach new audiences, potentially meet new clients, convert those people to customers and clients? And it's one of the only avenues, especially when starting out, for growing an audience, at least we're told. And I know for a lot of people, I remember this for myself too. I remember feeling like I had so much knowledge to share and it was so difficult to package that into a 5-second video or a 7-second video. And I got to the point just like you where I was like, this is not working. So I'm really glad you had that realization and that you were like, okay, maybe a podcast because it fits my skill set. This seems like something that would feel like more of a natural way to deliver my expert content. So I'm curious right there, when you had that idea of, okay, I think a podcast, was there anything that was getting in the way of you starting that podcast and actually taking the action to be okay, go from idea to actually creating the thing?
Definitely. I mean, I did not know what that would entail. I had no idea where to start. Yeah. I mean, I had started my online presence in Facebook through hiring an expert and having them walk me through the steps. And that quickly got me into getting clients in that avenue. So I knew, okay, it's worth the time and investment to work with an expert who can get me the template of here's how to do it right, here's how to do it well. Don't try to reinvent the wheel yourself, Flora. Every time I've done that, I spend twice as much time and 10 times as much money in the end trying to fix things that I didn't do well, like my website. So it's like, I just knew I wanted to find an expert that could walk me through, give me the template, get it started. I didn't know how to do that on my own. So it worked out really well that I had found someone through a podcast who I was working with as a business coach who had been a client of yours. And so she said, oh, if you're wanting to start a podcast, Courtney's the way to go. And so it was just so easy and seamless. And then when we met, it was comfortable. And I felt like it was definitely going to be a good avenue. And so, it just took away any worry that I would have to figure it out on my own, and dove in and just did everything you told me to do. And I'm so glad I did.
Well, you launched your podcast about a year and a half ago, and your results for your launch were incredible. Tell us about those. Tell us what that was like. Take us through what that launch day was like. What were some of the things you were feeling maybe internally leading up to that launch? And then when you got the results, tell us, how did that meet your expectations? And just take us through that whole process.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun. It was great to see the buildup pay off. You give all of these great steps of how you set up a community that's your launch team, and people were honored to be a part of that. It was so interesting, like that they felt honored to be invited, and so it was such a win-win that they got to feel like VIP insiders. And also, it definitely helped the launch feel so positive on my end. So within that launch, I got almost 100 reviews and over 1,000 downloads. And I actually didn't know if that was a good number or a bad number. But as I was working with your team, people and posting about it, then the team was giving me the feedback like, that's phenomenal. Oh my gosh, way to go. And so that felt really good to have that support and encouragement. And then it did launch at the top 20 of parenting podcasts, which also just felt like amazing. And as I was able to utilize the feedback from the stat tracker that says, woohoo, you are in the top 20, I was able to post that on social media. So it added a lot in terms of my credibility and authority in the online space I was already in and in my local community. So that was just all so fun and exciting.
Well, going back to something you said there a minute ago about like, I didn't even know if that was a good number or a bad number. And it's funny, we hear this so often. And I do my best, and of course throughout the program and in talking with clients, I'm like, it really doesn't matter. All it's going to give us is information that we can then build your growth strategy around. But yet we're so conditioned to believe, and I think a lot of this comes from that social media background where it's like, okay, higher followers equals more engagement or a bigger number of views on my video or a bit more comments, and I think what people don't often realize with podcasting, and the reason that it doesn't take quite as many downloads as sometimes we might be under the impression that it would in order to get visible, to get seen, to start getting discovered, to start gaining traction, is because the quality of a podcast listener is so much different than the quality of someone who's interacting on social media. On social media, we're just scrolling through videos really fast. We might like something, we might sit there and watch a video, but most of the time we're just scrolling. We're just kind of getting that quick hit of dopamine. Whereas on a podcast, people are there to learn. They're there to listen. They want to dive deep. So if someone is going to spend 20 minutes of their time with you or 30 minutes or 40 minutes listening to a podcast episode, already the quality of that interaction is so much higher. And so it allows us to gain traction so much more quickly. And that's where I'd love for you to take us next. Over this year and a half that you've been podcasting, you've been releasing an episode every week. You've been growing your show. Your show's been growing. I've been seeing your posts in our community of the ways that your show has been growing. Tell us, how has that impacted your business and what has this made possible for you since then?
Yeah, well, I totally love what you were just saying and can agree that it has definitely shown to be bringing the right customers to me, because you're absolutely right. Even good friends of mine would give me the feedback like, oh, I always see all your videos and I want to watch them. I'm struggling with my kid. But like when I'm on Facebook or Instagram, I'm not in the mood to learn. I'm honestly just wanting to see a puppy or whatever that will get my mind off of it. But the podcast absolutely has brought more people that are like, I'm really here to learn. And I love listening. Every time people get into DMs with me that are podcast listeners, they are giving feedback that I loved what you taught about this. I love hearing the new strategies each week. It definitely has connected me to the right people. But I would say I definitely get at least one new client a month from the podcast. And it helps my reach continue to be outside of my local area, because otherwise I get a lot of referrals locally. But I currently have a client from Estonia all the way over to California and Florida. So podcast listeners that can come from anywhere. And I think the podcast has also helped me get more referrals locally, just because, like we were saying, it adds that authority and expertise in people's eyes. So since I started the podcast, my number of local referrals has gone up tenfold, like from pediatricians, from local counselors, from heads of preschools and elementary school teachers, other counselors. I think that it's definitely increased clients in all different directions.
Wow, that's amazing. Just goes to show how, in positioning yourself as that authority, both in the online space and locally, people are now seeing you as that authority. And sometimes we get this backwards. I had this backwards when I started my business. I thought I needed a big following and a huge audience in order to be worthy of the authority, right? In order to have people see me as an authority. When I realized the opposite is true, I had to start putting myself out there as an authority and positioning myself that way so that people would see me that way. And it was like such an aha moment for me in that point in my business journey, because I was like, oh, I get it now. Okay, now how can I go out there and really position myself as that authority so people see me as that authority? And you know what else, Flora? I want to note here, especially for you listening right now, if you've got a podcast and maybe it hasn't been growing as quickly as you expected it to, or maybe you're like, I don't really know the numbers. Like, I don't really know what's good and what's not good. Just to give you this for your frame of reference, an average podcast that just hits publish, doesn't actually launch, just starts getting episodes out there and starts creating content. An average podcast gets around 2,000 total downloads, give or take, in a year's time. You just shared a post in our community about a month ago saying it's just under a year and I just crossed the 10,000 total downloads mark. So your podcast is growing 5 times faster than the average podcast. What would you say has contributed to that success? Like, what do you think is the thing or things that really has allowed you to get the traction that you're getting with your show?
Oh, goodness. I mean, it's so funny. Again, it feels so nice to hear that that's a good number. I think we always in our space can think, I wish it was, 1,000 a day or something like that. But it's like really nice to have someone be able to say, here's how it compares to the average. I definitely think that the reason that it's hit any of those numbers has just been following your protocol, making sure to mention during episodes to subscribe and share the podcast with, someone that leave a review, and people continue to do that. I think if I hadn't had that guidance, I wouldn't think to ask that. You just think of friends. I know a lot of friends had advice on this, you should do this about your podcast, this on the podcast. And I'm someone who can easily fall into people pleasing and wanting to do anything that someone suggests, but being able to like quiet all those voices and not listen to them saying like, oh, don't have an intro that asks for reviews because that's just annoying or something. Putting that aside and saying, okay, you may feel that way, but I know this is best practice from an expert who's telling me how to make sure my podcast is growing, that you have to ask for reviews. You have to be, giving them the invitations. Those pieces, like, it just helps to quiet the voices of the people that don't really know what they're talking about. Trust someone who does know what they're talking about, and then just staying consistent, having a process that you gave that was sustainable, that doesn't feel stressful, and just continuing to use that template again and again. When I feel lost in what should I say next, I go back to your wonderful list of 100 like great prompt ideas on what to name an episode, and that usually spurs my creativity that could be dwindling. So I just keep coming back to your resources to keep doing what I'm doing.
It's just like music to my ears because that's ultimately what we want for anyone who is part of our pod launch family is not only to have great results in the beginning to help really get your show off on the right foot. And when I say the right foot, to help you gain that traction from day one. So you don't have to go through all this trial and error and like figuring it out and wasting the time going down like these rabbit holes that don't lead anywhere. So to be able to get that traction early on, but then to also have the community to plug into and the principles that to plug back into when needed for the long-term growth of your show. And one of the things I always love to do, Flora, whenever I'm having a conversation with someone like yourself who's launched a podcast with us and we're kind of looking at like then versus now, is I like to go and see like where specifically are you ranking in terms of all podcasts. And out of all podcasts globally, right now, you're in the top 0.37%, which is incredible because it means your show is performing better than over 99% of podcasts out there.
That's so
And
phenomenal.
I just want to acknowledge you for
I
the
really
work
believe
you've
that.
isn't that wild? But also like you said, so great to hear and so great to see that like with the podcast, you've actually been able to make that splash, to make that impact in the marketplace, to be getting new clients every month from it. And, you know, without having to I want to poke your eyes out on social media. We all have this inner sense of like this feeling like we need to have a presence, but we know we're also not getting anywhere with having that presence on social media in the majority of cases. So any final thoughts for those that are listening right now? What advice would you leave someone with who is either considering starting a podcast or who has a podcast that just maybe isn't quite growing yet at the rate that they expected it to?
Yes, I think, well, I wish I'd done it sooner. You know, like you say, I also struggled with when, like, do I have to have enough expertise to finally start this? But I had been suggested by a friend 3.5 years before I started my podcast that she's like, I think you should do this. I think you'd be great at it. And it took me that long. And of course, as you know, like, you know, things keep adding. So don't wait. If you have it anywhere in your gut that this is calling to you, do it now so that you don't look back and wish you had done it 6 months to 3.5 years sooner, like I do, and find the expert that fits for you. I've been completely pleased with what I got from your program and the community. I'm glad you mentioned that because I also find that really unique that many other spaces I've been in with any sort of coaching, it's like you only have access to that community while you very first start, and then good luck to you, figure it out, or you have to pay us like $1 million for the rest of your life to continue having support. And so to have it be ongoing support in the community, it's been a great place to come back. Like I wanted to change my artwork at one point. I thought I had a great idea and then posted, and your team was like, whoa, 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 hold on. And that was so great to have that space for experts to give me a little bit of a check there that like, wait a minute, let's like make sure you're doing this intentionally and for the right reasons and in the right way. Because I can get a little impulsive sometimes and just want to change something. So yeah, I really appreciated the template. And I just would suggest to anyone thinking about it, do it. It's given me so much peace of mind to do way less in social media. I mean, I literally just feel this like exhale in my body when I think of the shift of what it's felt like to go from all social media outreach to a small amount of that and way more in my podcast. I feel balanced. I feel calmer. I feel more aligned to my values and my purpose. And I mean, that's worth everything.
That is, I mean, mic drop moment right there. It is worth everything. And I can hear it in your voice, just that relief and that you now have this system installed in your business that's bringing new people into your world every day, that's reaching people in places you would have never been able to reach them before, and that's bringing new clients. It's actually yielding an ROI. So all of us at Pod Launch Floor, we are just blown away by your journey. You are crushing it. Keep up the great work. And thank you just for being here today and sharing your story so openly, just to inspire hope in all of us as proof of what's possible.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all your support.
And if you're listening to this right now and you want to launch a podcast, or if you have a podcast that hasn't seen a significant increase in downloads in the last 3 months, despite releasing an episode every week and sharing your episodes with your email list and on social media, and even guesting on other podcasts, then scroll to the show notes and click the link to book a call with my team. Because unlike beginner level programs or production only agencies, What we do at Pod Launch is work hand in hand with you to build a strategy that gets listeners to choose your show over the competition every time and ultimately converts those listeners to clients. So if you're ready to launch a podcast or if you're ready to start scaling your podcast, go grab a time on our calendar and let's find out if you're a fit for Pod Launch. And then don't go anywhere, because in the next episode, I have got a very special guest joining us to talk about the exact steps that you can take to book in your dream podcast interviews on other top podcasts, and more importantly, on the right podcasts, so that you can get your show in front of new listeners and the right listeners who need what you have to offer. That's all coming up next to help you make your business binge-worthy.